Welcome everyone to Touchstone Topics, and our guest today is Nicole Brittney. She's the author of Uncovering Your Power, the guidebook to escaping emotional and physical abuse. I love that cover. Thank you for showing that. We're going to put the, if you wouldn't mind, Nicole, as we're rolling along, put your website in there because I'm going to mention it here a little bit later. My name is Diane Adam, and I'm co-creator of Touchstone Central Coast. And I, along with my partner, Emily Smith, devised Touchstone Topics as conversations and explorations of issues that neither of us have any real expertise in. We're both great fans of authors and reading, and we've both read your beautiful book, Nicole, and we offer praise for that. We also love connections, and this is how Nicole and I and Emily got to meet one another. Our friend Reginald Ryder, who's a colleague of Nicole's, who was her #1 encourager to both write and publish this book. And the book is so powerful, and thanks to friends and encouragers, right? As I read the book, as I read Uncovering Your Power, I was all at once surprised, amazed, and sympathetic. The guideposts for me were especially effective in creating a space to pause and reflect, because I think the topic has touched almost everybody, whether they realize it or not. So for me, I appreciate that, and I thank you, Nicole. By the end of the book, I had a whole list of friends and relatives that I thought, oh, this one little piece will be excellent, or maybe even the whole book. And I have passed it to a couple of people. So Nicole and I have a conversation planned. And so 1 hour goes by super duper fast. So those of you who are in attendance today, if you have a question or comment, don't hesitate to put it in the chat and we'll see how we go. But as I said earlier, Nicole and I have had some time to prepare, and we have a little conversation to have. So Nicole put her website into the chat. And so if you feel during any time of this hour that you want to reach out to Nicole personally, please do so through that website. And I don't know if, Nicole, you like handing out your email address. I thought maybe, we would leave that to you. I don't want to be presumptuous. So there's a chat option, so please use it if you feel like it, to the attendees. And there on her website, you can even get a copy of her book and read the blogs, read those blogs from 2020 that led up to the writing and publishing of this book. They're all very powerful. The titles themselves are worth a look and a pondering. So before we get started, I'd like to start with a few words from Lala Delia. She's a spiritual writer and the founder of Vibrate Higher Daily. If you walked away from a toxic, negative, abusive, one-sided, dead-ended, low vibrational relationship or friendship, you won. So with that, welcome once again to Nicole Brittney, and let's just get started with the basics, why don't we? What is Uncovering Your Power about, and sort of what led you to writing this book?
Of course. Thank you so much, Diane. And I think that the quote that you just used really touched me, and it has a lot to do, of course, with what Uncovering Your Power is about. So Uncovering Your Power, the guidebook to escaping emotional and physical abuse. It is a testament of the wisdom that I learned through my own experience with abuse, as well as a fictional book, a romantic take on a couple's relationship that starts out with all good intentions, but takes a few wrong turns. So throughout the midst of sharing the character's story, I also speak about just the different stages that they're going through and how they correlate with the experience that I had and some of the advice that I would give to someone in perhaps a similar situation.
Were you given some of the same advice? Did you come up with the guideposts based on your own personal experience as well?
That is a really, really good question. So I definitely came up with the different ideas that I shared in the book through my experience. And I will say as I went through my experience and as I went through a lot of different relationships in life, I was given a lot of different advice that at the time I may have really listened to, or at the time I may have discarded and left array. But more often than not, this is a compilation, yes, of the things that I drew out of my own understanding, but also some of the things that brilliant and good people, supportive people within my family and my support system were able to give me advice on in the moment as well.
That's a real testament to the need that we all have, the need that we should all listen to get a support system, right? And would you care to describe some of your support system? I know we didn't talk about that earlier, but sometimes these conversations lead into beautiful places. So can you describe for me a little bit of the complexion of the people in your support system?
Exactly. Yeah, sure thing. And even to start, one of the reasons why, and I think you asked this a few moments ago, but one of the reasons why I wrote Uncovering Your Power was because when I was in the midst of my experience, oftentimes when someone is in an abusive situation, they don't necessarily tell everyone around what they're going through. Oftentimes, this is something that a lot of people go through in private. So in the private reading of Uncovering Your Power, I want readers to also have this compassionate outlet, this voice, this feeling of compassion that they are being heard and understood within their experience. So I would say within my own experience, I honestly, I isolated myself a bit, Diane. So there were a lot of times where I was just kind of figuring things out and giving family members and friends clues, but not necessarily like painting the whole picture of like, this is what's going on in my private life. But I will say the support systems that I had in place as far as spiritual guidance with my church and things like that, always empowering. There was a time also where I seeked community help. And I think that that's something when you're in a situation that's specific to a specific need, sometimes you need people that can talk about that one specific thing. And for me, it was emotional abuse, it was physical abuse. So oftentimes I would use support groups. Oftentimes I would speak to a counselor about what I had going on. And there's no shame in that. These are support systems that helped me to feel heard in a time when I didn't feel heard. So.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were dropping clues to people. If people didn't pick up on your clues, how did you manage that? I mean, did you then go to a different person for support or find a different route to get heard? Because I'm hearing you say that you were speaking with clues.
Yes, definitely speaking with clues, and speaking with clues in an attempt to receive love that I wasn't receiving again within the midst of the relationship. So I, in my situation, felt and was very isolated. So I know that there were times, even I'm in a sorority, I am a very social person. I have family friends that were inviting me to events that at the time I was saying no to. And I couldn't necessarily, I think I hurt some people because of my absence. So that in and of itself, without saying anything, but when there is a person that typically we see smiling and participating and interacting in different events, and they're, Nicole's always at the family cookout, or Nicole's always at our chapter get together, like that. Oftentimes when you see someone who's reverted back or who tends to isolate themselves and there is possibly a new relationship at hand, that's one clue. And then I would just say, for me, I think that there were changes in my demeanor and even just a slight cynicism to me at the time, a slight not as optimistic, not as happy, not as bubbly, that sort of thing. So some of the clues are not always verbal, and they're not always like, let me share this big secret with you. Sometimes it's look at my body language and listen to when you speak to me, the tone in my voice, things of that manner, nonverbal clues. I think it just has to do, anytime you love someone, anytime you have a family member or a friend that's close to you that you're used to talking to often, just paying attention to those little clues that perhaps, and it may not be as wild as some of the things that I went through, but at the same time, it may just be a clue that they're in need of a little bit of support and compassion and love. And
Yeah.
that's something that we need at so many different stages. So.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I personally found so many insights as I was reading this book for myself, and realized through the reading that your words, your story, even though it's a fictional story, is universal for men, women, friends, family. So a lot of the guideposts and a lot of the words that you use, even though people might not be in a similar sort of a relationship. So talk a little bit about who's your audience? Who do you hope will take something from this book? Because I don't know if you intended me, but I sure got something from it, right? So how do we get to the people that you want to get to?
Of course, that's so good to hear, Diane. Thank you for sharing. Thank you
Sure.
for sharing. That is what an author wants to hear. That is what a leader, anyone that shares a story with an audience, wants to hear, that it was impactful and that it was touching. So for me, first and foremost, and I keep going back to this just feeling of isolation, but what really, really moved me was the fact that I didn't necessarily feel at the time that I had all of the resources and support that I needed. So first and foremost, I wrote the book for people who feel like their voice is not heard, perhaps because someone is making them feel that way, or perhaps because they have never elevated their voice in a way that they could be heard. So first and foremost, anyone who is dealing with hardship within a relationship, it could be emotional abuse, it could be physical abuse, it could just be that, you're so in love with someone and they don't necessarily know how to love you back, or you're so in love with someone, but you don't know how to express that to them. This is a book truly encouraging, just at its core, healthy love. So first and foremost, it is for people who want to be able to engage in healthy love, people who want to be able to give healthy love as well as to receive it. It is definitely a book for survivors of abuse, men and women, people in all different walks of life, all different ages. I also think it's a great book for communities and people who may not have been taught healthy dating rituals, because I think that that's something too that we don't always talk about. A lot of people begin at an early age dating, and especially if you have come from a background with a dysfunctional family, perhaps, you might not know how to enter into a relationship in a healthy form, or you may not know what a healthy relationship looks like to you. So I'm hoping to kind of just open the door to trying to explore that and research that. And then lastly, I would just say it is a book for people who want to be supportive to someone who they know may be in an unhealthy relationship.
We all have moments where we think, oh my goodness, I'd like to say something to that friend, or maybe I need to think about this myself. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I felt the impact. So speaking of the book itself, talk to us a little bit about the characters, and is the story of Michelle and Dwayne, I feel that it's a real story because it seems like we've seen this story, and you want Dwayne to get it together, and you want Michelle to wake up, and that's what kind of kept me reading. Like, are these two people going to get it together? Is he going to understand what he's doing wrong, and is she going to get the heck out of there? So talk to us a little bit about Michelle and Dwayne.
Of course, definitely. So whenever we're talking about a difficult topic like abuse, often, like when I wrote the book, I just thought, how could I make this impactful, and how could I make this something that people would actually be okay reading and want to read and not feel like they were being preached at and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Full of like kind of the psychological things that you get in different trauma books and all of that. I am an adventurist and I am a storyteller just by nature. I enjoy telling stories. So the story of Dwayne and Michelle actually incorporates a lot of different experiences that I have heard through different walks of life that I have seen. And it's not my own experience. It is definitely a fictional book, but is about by pieces of stories that I have heard from others that they have said, hey, it's okay. Like you can use this bit of content to enhance and to make this interesting story that you want to bring to the table. So what I wanted to do as well, because I want to gear this book as well to young readers, I want to be able to have a story that people, again, can possibly relate to. Perhaps there is an aspect of something that occurred within their relationship that sparks, a memory. Oh, I remember when I maybe was spoken to in this way. I remember when I was starting a relationship and just thought that, the flowers and the grass was just so green, and then it made a turn. And then I want the reader to think critically about when there are these turns and these shifts within your relationships. How are you dealing with them? Are you possibly kind of moving forward as Michelle and Dwayne did within the book? And are you just kind of living in the moment? Are you using a little bit of reason as well as the emotion that you're giving to your relationship? So it's honestly a story just to kind of bring the reader in, just to kind of tell some adventure and some love and some spark, but also just really not normalize, but bring to earth the fact that abuse happens oftentimes in relationships where we might not have seen it as abuse, but there are certainly red flags in the midst. So.
Well, for sure. And we've all experienced abusive instances. And I recognize that a number of times in the story of Dwayne and Michelle, because you're thinking we're going to a wedding and you're happy and looking fly and he is ready to go too. And then, like you just said, something takes a turn. So speaking of that and how the story evolves, I felt very strongly that the way you put the guide and you call it Uncovering Your Power, the guide, which I think even the title that you came up with is so powerful. Can you go into a little more detail about the cycles of abuse that you describe? Because you cut the book up into bite-sized chapters, and you just said it yourself, you created it for maybe sometimes a younger audience, people who could digest it easily, and the way that you divvied the book up into those guideposts. Talk a little bit about the cycle of abuse and how you put that wove it through the book.
Of course. And you already kind of touched on it. It was a slow ramp up to an actual abusive situation. And I think, again, sometimes you're in an abusive relationship that never, ever, ever gets physical, but sometimes it's in the way a person speaks to you, and it's in a way a person maybe isolates you, or in a way a person maybe keeps you away from the things or the people that you love. So again, it starts with just that general interest. All right, I meet someone that I like, and we're hanging out and we're going out on dates, and they are showering me with love, and I am showering them with love. Hopefully, that's what we all want when we start a relationship. We all want to meet someone that like texts us all the time, that wants to take us out, that we can get dressed up for, yada, yada, yada. So it starts out with that honeymoon stage, that exploration stage, that stage of just, I want to get to know you and you want to get to know me. And then we are mutually falling for one another. All right. And Diane, I want to go into these different stages that I speak about, but I do want to just take one moment to say, I am speaking of the stages from just a very situational kind of approach. I'm not a professional. I definitely am not a professional in emotional health and domestic violence and that sort of thing. I'm speaking from my own experiences, my own research, my own understandings. So again, we begin with the honeymoon stage. There's a slow ramp up, and then we begin to just see red flags. So in the story of Michelle and Dwayne, those red flags are all around, all of a sudden Dwayne's around all the time, and then now he's disappearing. Where is he going? Why isn't that being communicated to Michelle? Why can't they speak openly about, his absences and things like that? And then the demeanor that begins to change. And I definitely also want to say that, in this story, Dwayne was the person who was the aggressor, but it could have very well been Michelle. This happens, to both men and women. A man or a woman can be abusive to another, But again, begins with the honeymoon stage. You see a different red flag, perhaps in a way that you're being treated, a way that you're being spoken to, or a lack of communication. And then it goes into kind of this back and forth limbo of, all right, it's calm, and then there's some weird things going on, but then they're showing me love again. And then all of a sudden, there's this big situation that occurs that is like, that was definitely not okay. This was the big red flag. This was the situation of physical abuse. There is no saying that this was not. And that's what we see in this particular story. But then the relationship kind of goes back into that calm, like, okay, everything, please forgive me for what's happened. I understand. I accept them for their weaknesses. I take them back. And then we have this slow ramp up yet again, this buildup of tension where we're seeing that things are happening that are not okay, but because they're not really being addressed and actually dealt with or just left for good, they continue to build up. And then we see another impactful situation happen. And I would say oftentimes that is the cycle that, every day is not a bad day. And I think that that's why so many people get confused. Like, if it was so bad, why didn't you leave? Well, right after the bad situation, we went, to another country and we had the best 3-day vacation or something, things happen. Of course, you are seeing the person in a very vulnerable state, but more often than not, these are the red flags where you can either decide as a person that I'm going to stay in this, but you see what a person is capable of. So it just kind of gives you, that's that pause where you should say as a person, number one, take account into what do you deserve? What do you want in a relationship? What do you see as your value? I think being in an abusive situation forces a lot of people to look inward. And oftentimes that looking inward could either make you leave and say, hey, I'm done with this. Like, forget this. We're going on. I can do better. And then sometimes you actually realize just how vulnerable and how weak you may be, how insecure you may be. And those are the kind of feelings inside that keep the cycle perpetuating.
Ooh, which is what the beginning title is, Uncovering Your Power. We all have the power, right? So can I ask a vulnerable question? And what was the most difficult part of your own personal journey? What was the most difficult stage for you?
The most difficult stage for me, I had difficulty in many of the stages, but it is trying to find peace in the midst of chaos. So I think the beginning stages are, and I wouldn't say easier, none of it's easy, but it's kind of like you're making a choice. All right, I see these things and I'm choosing to still be involved. So for me, I kind of thought, I'm strong enough. Like, this person is just like, they need someone to love them. They need someone to love them strong. And I'm going to be that person that shows them that love is kind and love is gentle. But once I got to the point where things were happening so consistently and so impactfully and so overwhelmingly, like, this part of me that thought, I'm so strong, it's okay, like, I'm going to be able to show them different, was overpowered at a time. And that was a time that came like, I didn't anticipate it. It was there before I knew it. And that it was just a lot of pressure and just a very overwhelming, kind of like the ceilings just like coming down on you, and you're trying to breathe and remember that strength that you had yesterday and a few months ago, and to just get that strength so you can finally just say, like, no, actually, I changed my mind. Enough is enough. I'm ready to move on. So the most difficult stage for me was the stage where I realized this is not for me. This is not how I want to live. And now I need to get out. But these cycles have already been going on and continuing. So it had to be a more impactful break in the cycle than it would have been if I would not have ignored the red flags and if I would have walked away sooner. So the walk away, the deciding that this isn't for me, and the saying, like, not only is this not for me, I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to have the strength not to go back. that was a cycle in and of itself for me. Uh,
Mhm.
but that was probably the most difficult stage, because once I got through that and I broke the communication, and then now that communication isn't there, well, then you can start to honestly just breathe, to cry, to realize what you just went through, and to begin looking at the steps to repair.
Yeah. That's it's so hard to think about being in that situation and being somebody from the outside. I'm imagining your friends and your relatives who are seeing some of the red flags and wishing in the evening, and the people who you were giving clues to. And I can imagine the difficulty and that awakening, and then the fear of how do I move on and cut the tie and cut the communication. So if taking all that into consideration, are there any real specific recommendations that you would offer for someone who's struggling with abuse, or maybe just now recognizing that they're in an abusive situation?
Yes. I would first say, hey, by uncovering your power.
Yes.
And it's not to say seek out someone that's been through it. Like, you don't want to go asking people, have you been abused? Or like, there's no,
Yeah.
way to do that per se. But I will say, oftentimes when you're in a situation where you feel that you're going through something, but you may not be sure, sometimes it does take kind of talking through that. So first, I would just say, like, don't isolate yourself. If you're in a situation where you feel, I can't speak to my mother, my father, I can't speak to my friends about this, that's a red flag. And I maybe would try to find someone professionally, or I find someone, in the, and I don't want to say spiritual one, but possibly some sort of resource. And I will say, we are in the age of technology. So we are in a time where, depending on what situation you go through, you can literally put it in Google and say, like, someone called me this name, and you can find different blog articles. And it may seem silly, but I would definitely say, if you can't speak with someone about what you're going through, begin to just research it and begin to kind of have that internal dialogue with yourself, and on what you're really dealing with. I think the main thing that you have to do in a situation where you think you may be in something that's not healthy is to take a realistic look, not to sugarcoat it, not to say, oh, but it's okay, they've been, not to make excuses for yourself or for anyone else, but to look at your situation kind of from like a third eye perspective. Look at your situation as if, if this were a friend coming to me and sharing with me this particular instance, what would I say to them? What would that would be a start. In and of that advice, I would say, build a support system. Have someone that that you can talk to on an ongoing basis about what you may be experiencing. Again, research, research, research. And then what's big, and another thing that I talk a lot about, is self-love, building self-love. Because I think when a person truly understands and has love of self, oftentimes, we don't find ourselves in these situations, or when we do, we're able to have that strength to say, like, this isn't for me. So being able to have your own interests, your own outlets, whether it be like a book club, you could be a nerd like me, you could be I'm into athletics and the workout scene. So for me, those were huge resources for me in building confidence. But you want to have something that is only yours, that no one can take away from you. So even if there's this person in your life that may be trying to limit your perspective of yourself, or limit the things that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, being able to have an area in your home where you paint, or where you read, or where you go outside and go skating or bike riding, having some sort of resource that builds you up, that gives you a smile. That might be cooking, again, painting, artistics. I have a puzzle over here that I've been nagging away at for a long time, but something that takes your mind off the day to day, because you'll need that. And I think that's a big part of self-love. Taking a bath, painting your nails, getting a massage, taking a long walk, whatever you can do to just kind of remove yourself from the situation and remember that you're human, and also just cater to yourself a bit, because oftentimes in a situation where you're being demeaned, you may not be getting that from your partner. It may be for a moment, it may be for a season, but that's something that you can give to yourself. So
Yeah.
outlet and self-love. We'll stop there because I feel like I'm rambling if I go any further.
Yeah. Hey, that's what a conversation is, a little bit of a ramble. You're bringing something to my mind about what do you feel? I'm not asking your professional opinion. We've already talked about that, but I've been in a situation where somebody said to me, I don't like what's going on in my, like they were verbal enough to tell me that. And all the people around them said, oh, but he's such a great guy. And why would you ditch that? And how can you think that way? You know, how do you support another person? How do you, Nicole, support somebody who says, gosh, my whole support system thinks this guy is magic? What, you know, how do I deal with that? Because there's that side of it too.
Oh, there is that side of it for sure. And more often than not, the men and women who have shared stories with me about abuse have actually shared instances like that. And that kind of goes into something that I researched just around like the narcissistic, cycle of abuse and of relationships, because oftentimes, and that's something that I went through. I have definitely been in relationships where this person looks like, like the sun just shines on them and they are God's gift to earth. And not to say that they aren't, everyone, is their own person, but in an intimate relationship, you see the deepest, darkest, most private sides of someone. So that is something, again, where you have to be true to yourself and you have to have that core foundation for you as to what you will accept and not accept, because the decision to leave a relationship, as much respect that you may have for your support system and for the people around you, that is a conviction that is true to you and only you. Only you will go home to this person on a day-to-day basis. Only you will deal with the good and the bad. They may be there as a shoulder to cry on in a particular moment, but you have to deal with the impact of whatever it is that may be hurting you, or, if it's a good relationship, whatever it is that is uplifting and that is giving you life. So where I think, again, it's nice to have a support system and it is good to have people around you that are cheerleaders for your relationship. I think we should cheerlead healthy love, but just keep in mind, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Perception is one thing, reality is another. If you're in a situation where you feel your reality isn't up to par with what you need as a person, this doesn't mean that it has to be because of abuse. Maybe it's just you just fell out of love. You don't like this person anymore. You have every right to stay in the relationship or to leave. That is your choice and your choice only.
Yeah. From the chat, this bit of this conversation has led someone to ask, what's the best way to help support a friend who's being abused by her husband? And she's feeling like this participant feels like she wants to get your book, but not sure that giving the book would be good for this woman, because the husband of the woman being abused would be, upset if he were to find this book or to see this book. So kind of the opposite. What do we do to support people who can't talk about it?
Right. That's a really, really good question. And that is something that is touched on. So if you couldn't get your friend this book, I would say perhaps you could read this book, because I do actually go into a lot of depth about what I wish and what I wanted and what was valuable to me and friends and family that offered support. So first, I would say for you supporting your friend, be a friend, be a loved one, because if you're, this person that you love is in the midst of a difficult relationship, love may be something that they are not getting consistently. Friendship may not be something that they are receiving on a consistent basis. So again, that's something that I talk about in depth in uncovering your power, you have the ability to, whether it be in a phone call, whether it be on a coffee date or lunch, you have the ability to pour love into them and to remind them, oftentimes, what are they good at? What do you love them for? What do you like to see when you see them? Is it like, are they, hilarious and funny and they make you laugh? Do they have the brightest smile that you've ever seen? Like, remind them of their gifts, remind them of why you love them or why other people love them, because maybe that is something that they are not hearing at home. I would just say the best thing that anyone can do is just to be a consistent friend, to be a consistent outlet. I think it's very, very difficult. Oftentimes, when you see someone in a relationship that isn't right for them, it's difficult to just sit and watch. It's difficult to say, like, this jerk is really treating my friend badly and often. Like, I want them to leave, and I want to tell them that they need to leave. Well, there are so many pressures that they're going through in the midst of this relationship. You being another person that comes to the table and makes demands for them to leave or suggestions that they should do this or that could be very, very overwhelming. I think that there are ways that you could sprinkle in your outlook. There are ways that you could say, I don't see you. I miss that smile, that you used to come to the table with, and those jokes that you used to tell. What happened to that? You can drop hints, certainly. And if it's a person that you think there are times you can speak directly to about, speak directly, but also just offer compassion and let them know, whether you leave or not, no matter what happens, no matter if I don't see you for a year, I'm here for you. I'm going to love you no matter what. And I think that sometimes that is just that one thing that reminds them, like, I've had love that didn't look like this before. And just being able to give that bit of compassion and that bit of friendship, I think, goes a lot further than a lot of people think.
I think you're right. And that talks to a clue of a different kind, a clue coming from the other side, rather than you giving clues to your loved ones like, I'm being hurt, you being a supporter and giving a clue that says, I'm here. So little clues are good. And the question is all about a cultural thing too. And Sarah's saying that her friend is from India. So we all have experiences with people of different cultures. I mean, even here in America, north, south, east, west, we've got it all, right? And so when the world is so global, and as you've already said, Nicole, technology is also our friend. Send somebody a blog, send somebody your website where they can look at it in the privacy of their own home even. Because your blog was very powerful and speaks to a number of the things that we've talked about here. So I'm plugging your blog again. So tell us how some of the signs where we as friends and supporters and relatives and co-workers even might look. What are the signs look like that somebody that we know and love is in an abusive situation? The signs to find and dig in and find out that they are.
Yeah, that's a good question, Diane. And I definitely want to say it probably looks different for everyone, because some people have that poker face where, like, they could be going through hell and high water and you would never ever know. And then other people wear their heart on their sleeve. I could be a bit of either or. But the first thing I would definitely say to look for is just changes in general, but changes specifically in self-esteem. Because that's often something that is attacked. And that's probably one of the most consistent things that is attacked in an abusive situation. So changes in self-esteem, changes in a person's ability to have their voice be heard, to speak their piece, to participate in different events and conversations and things like that. Changes in self-esteem definitely could be a red flag that someone's going through something at home. It could also be a red flag for a number of other things too. So you don't ever want to make assumptions. And then again, another hit in that realm is just changes in participation. This person is my loved one, and I've always seen them come to the Sunday dinner at grandma's house. But now all of a sudden they're not going. You could just outright ask, or that may be something that you want to pay attention to. Changes in finances, changes in interests, changes in their levels of feeling secure in and of themselves. Changes even in energy level. And then, a lot of things, some of the same things that you might look for in a person who could possibly be depressed or possibly be like, emotionally unwell, could be someone that is possibly going through something that is evolving from situations that have started in an intimate relationship. Then again, of course, true physical symptoms. Like if you see someone, I oftentimes had like bruises around my wrists and things like that, like little things like that, cuts and bruises and things that aren't accounted for, or that there is some wild story behind. So I think it differs by person, it differs by situation. But more often than not, if someone's going through something physically, you could also sense it emotionally. It's starting there. So I would say just changes in that particular person's personality, changes in their involvement. Those are good places to start. But again, I do want to say you don't ever want to make assumptions, and you don't ever want to, you don't want to come to a person and just blame or just make it an accusation. But you can pry and you can dig, and especially if it's someone that you're used to speaking with often and that you do love, I'm sure there are ways that you know how to connect with them to possibly bring out some of the clues that could give you a deeper understanding of what they might be going through.
Yeah, you're talking all about really we need to open our eyes and open our ears and be a loving listener to our friends and loved ones. And it's all really, the clues are always there, big or small. And sometimes, as you say, they're just a little visible clue that doesn't look the same as it did as this person doesn't look the same as they did last time, or doesn't feel the same. So we have to be aware of our own feelings in that situation, right, as supporters and lovers of each other. So as a supporter and as somebody who loves someone who's in a potentially abusive relationship, how do you recommend, Nicole, that people, I love your word empower, uncovering your power. How do we as supporters and loved ones help to see somebody's, help the person to be empowered, to uncover their own power, which is what your title is all about. We have it. So how do we empower each other? Because we all need it, right?
Of course, certainly. And I think we touched on it a bit. Number one, compassion, like just providing compassion, providing healthy friendship, healthy love to the person. It all starts there. And then we did touch as well on the age of technology and being in like this basically research driven kind of time. So there are also, like, if you think this person may not be may not have the resources for themselves, maybe you go on a little scavenger hunt and you say, like, based on this person's personality or what I think they may be going through, what are some resources for them that I think may be helpful? I spoke about it, and I know it's a little bit taboo. A lot of people don't want to go to a support group. And even, I have a friend that told me that they go to like the AA, they go to these meetings, and not because they are particularly addicted to alcohol, but because they have addictions to other things and they want to break this cycle. So not to say that you take them to that particular meeting, but maybe you find like an online event or something that may be indirectly speaking to healthy relationships. And that's kind of the way that I wanted to bridge things with Uncovering Your Power. It's not just for people who have been through abusive situations, but people who want to embark in healthy relationships. And maybe you go to this family building event with the person, and you just invite them and you say, on Saturday, my community or my church or my support group or system, this unique organization that I found is having an event on building healthy families and relationships. And I could really work on this in my life. Would you go with me? Maybe you put it on yourself. Like, this is something I want to work on. I've been at home yelling at the kids and I want to stop. So I want to go to this event. And I think, if you could go with me, it would be a huge help. Or, I'm reading this book on overcoming trauma because I had a difficult childhood. Do you think that you would be my reading partner or be a part of this book club with me? and we
Mhm.
went on this book together.
Mhm.
And then we talked about the fact that sometimes people are in a situation at home where that you may not be able to send them a book or a resource or that kind of thing. Perhaps you can email a resource, or perhaps again, you could bring something to work or and say like, hey, let's go get coffee. And at the coffee date, you share some of the highlights that you've read
Mhm.
on their behalf.
Mhm.
So I think just taking a moment to think about the person at hand and what they may need, and then either outright recommending it or maybe finding a little unique way to get it in front of their foresight.
Oh, so clever. It's always nice to be invited somewhere, right? And if I said, "Hey, come with me to this. I'm interested in this. I'm famous for always saying yes to things." So, I mean, I've got myself into some wacky situations by that, but I've also learned a lot and explored things, just as you're saying. And it's a wonderful way to engage with a friend or a loved one. Um, we're winding down the hour, but one really hard-hitting question here towards the end is, you've already talked about yourself leaving your abusive relationship, and tell us what your advice would be to somebody who's made that choice, who's made that decision, or maybe who has just left a relationship and really wants to, or maybe they don't even know they need a recovery period. Recovery is kind of goes forever. So talk a little bit about that, about recovery, and how do we support people in recovery or wanting or needing recovery. We've talked a little bit about resources and things, and I'm sure that's all wrapped up, but is there anything you'd like to add about recovery?
Yes, that is one of the most difficult stages. And that is the time where you are going to have to be compassionate with yourself, because especially if you were in a cycle of abuse, just because you left doesn't necessarily mean that your partners decided that this has ended as well. So they may, continue to come to the table and say, hey, and try to incite you to engage in the relationship again. Sometimes you may fail. Sometimes you may be, pat yourself on the back and say, no, I said that I wasn't involved in this anymore. So first, I would say you really have to stand behind your decision. If you made a decision to leave a situation, if you believe you left because it was abusive, especially, but any reason that you think that you left a situation, it's for your own benefit and your own good and your own peace of mind. Perhaps it would be good for you to write down the reasons that you left, write down the situations that led up to you leaving that situation. And then this can be a kind of journal and a reference for you. So when those moments come where this person might come back into your life and say, I want to be a part of your life again, or you may have a lonely day and you may say, I want to call them and I want to see what they've got going on. And this can be exactly, this can be your reminder as to why you said goodbye in the first place. So you want to stand behind your decision, for one, because the more that you go back and forth, the harder it's going to be for you, and the more complicated it's going to get. Possibly the more toxic and nasty the situation can get. So as you are on your own and have decided that you left this situation and now you're outside of it, you're dealing with you're going to need some love and compassion. So you're going to need a support system around you again, whether this be people, family members, a hobby, like maybe there's a bike group that you wanted to join, or a paint group or book club or what have you, something for you to do on a consistent basis that it has nothing to do with you sitting at home watching TV. Like you want to kind of get yourself out and about in the community. Maybe even it's just an evening walk every day for an hour, just something that is an opportunity for you to step outside of your usual routine. And then hopefully it's something that also just gives you a smile and kind of rejuvenates your spirit. And then I would just say it would be good to have possibly professional resources in place, just someone to talk to that may know your situation. Again, if you're not comfortable speaking to someone, possibly journaling is something that you can do, or an online blog. This is why I wrote Uncovering Your Power. I was in the midst of leaving my situation, and I was isolated. I didn't feel comfortable speaking to a lot of people because the person that I was dealing with was reaching out to everyone themselves too. And it just got to be a very messy situation. So I just started writing and I started writing and I started just loving on myself and just taking baths and lighting candles and having different ideas, taking time to myself. And then in the midst of just writing and researching and like, how do I get over trauma and how do I move forward and finding all of these different resources for myself, I realized there are probably a lot of other people that need resources too. And I ended up writing a book. So just finding that life within yourself, finding that passion within yourself, and then just acting on it in some way. That is an amazing way to love on yourself. For me, I built a lot of confidence in getting involved. A lot of people know, like, I like to box and I'm really big into fitness.
Oh.
Boxing was a huge point of assistance for me because it gave me something to work at on a week-to-week basis. It gave me something that made me feel empowered and made me feel strong and made me feel, no one can ever take away your health, no matter how hard they so it was something that like I had that was sacred, that I could cherish. And then not only that, in working on myself, all right, now when I get dressed up, I feel very confident in myself. Now when I go to this event, because I put myself in this empowering, like, badass woman kind of situation, I feel like that. And I'm wearing that cloak of armor in the community too. And when I'm going outside, that helped me to rebuild my confidence. So you put things in place that make you feel good about yourself, that help remind you that you are like the baddest thing walking and that you are a superhero in and of your own right. Because anyone who has gotten through abuse on any level, being able to walk away and say, I choose a better love for myself, you are your own superhero. So you're going to want to celebrate yourself as often as possible.
Oh my goodness. Amen to all of that. And I think it's of note that the way we're talking is recovery looks different for everybody. And you can get recovery by empowering yourself. You can get recovery by saying yes to that friend who has a clue, who has dropped you a clue, so those clues are so important. I'm getting so much out of this hour than I ever thought of getting from reading the book. So one very last question. We're just about done. And as Emily and I have grown Touchstone Central Coast, we endeavor every day to lead with love. And Nicole, can you describe for us, what does leading with love mean to you?
Leading with love. I love this part of Touchstone. Vision and just the core of what you all stand for, I do. So, and when I was in college, I was in an organization, and our one of our values was to lead is to serve. So when you actually shared this with me initially, that's the first thing that I thought about. So I think that leading with love is that part of leadership that takes the self out, that part of leadership that wants more for others. And is willing to use whatever God put within you and within yourself as a gift, something that you share with others that may be in need of it. So to me, leading with love is just thinking about the audience, thinking about the person in front of you or the group in front of you or the cause in front of you, and being able to pour and insight, wisdom, love, compassion, your gifts inside of that particular group to let them push forward, whether you're there with them, whether you're getting the recognition for it or not. I think leading with love is all about being selfless and just putting yourself out there to whatever unique gifts that you have that can help to build up someone else, that you just give them away. Just give them away and have faith that they're going to come back to you. I think that's a part of leadership that we need more of.
Yeah, giving your love away. You've talked about loving yourself, loving others, loving the people who need you the most, loving people who really don't love you right back immediately. Love makes the world go round, right? And I've been seeing signs all over the city. I'm in a foreign city to myself right now, and love is love, and we're at the end of Pride Month, and I just am feeling this love for community all around, and it's been storming here, and nobody's gotten irritated or upset, but they're all kind of just getting along and trying to support one another through the day. So your words are much appreciated. And to the audience, we so appreciate you being here. And thank you for asking a question. And I want to let everybody know that Nicole has given us permission to record. And when I get home at the end of this month, I'll package the recording and put it on our YouTube channel. And Nicole, I am thinking about a jillion people that I'm going to just send this recording to, because like we've talked about, it doesn't have to be the book on the side table. It can be the Kindle edition where people can read it clandestinely. Or it can be, hey, watch this, little YouTube movie that I saw from a friend. So, I mean, you've given us so many ways to resource and to access support and help through you, through your book, through your beautifulness. And we really appreciate you coming to this conversation. So as I say, we'll add this conversation to our website, and that's www.touchstonecc.com. And we encourage everybody to visit us as well on Facebook and Instagram at Touchstone Central Coast. Nicole, I know you have an handle as well, if you'd care to share.
Of course, my is for Instagram is Uncovering Your Power, and I will also, if I can spell correctly,
Perfect.
that to our chat. And then of course you can contact me, purchase the book, or see some of our additional writing on www.uncoveringyyourpower.com.
I encourage everyone to go there. I breezed through it a little bit this morning again to review, and I was just blown away just by the titles of your blogs. And thank you to our friend Reginald Ryder to put us in connection, right? Yes. Who encouraged you. We all need encouragers, and it's obvious that you've had a beautiful, sunshiny group of encouragement, and we appreciate you showing up for us today and with us. And we're now part of each other's community, which is a beautiful thing. So to our audience members, we say thank you. To Nicole, thank you so much. And I know Nicole and I are on the same time zone. Yes, it's 4 o'clock here and 1 o'clock on the Central Coast of California where we normally are. So to everyone, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay.
All right. Bye, Diane. Thank you, Touchstone.